I think it's time we admit that life without a conscience is much easier than life with one, and that it's easy to shed one's conscience. It's easy to shed your conscience. It's easy to shed your conscience while claiming to have a superior conscience. But think of the advantages of having no conscience. Think of the power you gain from not having it. Conscience is constricting. Conscience is limiting. It limits the range of things you can do. And if you operate without one, you are at a clear advantage, a clear power advantage. It's very difficult, if not impossible, for someone with a conscience to beat someone who has none, who has somehow shed their conscience. Shedding a conscience is basically elective psychopathy, and it's not that hard. It's really easy, in fact. All you got to do is find some master excuse, some claim. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to even consider its substance. But some claim that makes it so that you declare yourself right, righteous, and mighty, officially, formally, eternally. And then you can do whatever you want. And whatever you do is covered by your master excuse. It could be anything. Like I say, it doesn't matter what the content of it is. It's easiest when you're doing something that is either extremely popular, claiming something extremely popular, like I'm a Christian and therefore I no longer need to monitor myself. God is monitoring me approvingly. Or it could be something defiant, like counter to whatever everybody else is. I'm the brave maverick who is breaking away from the sheep in the flock to say something true, right, righteous, and mighty. It doesn't matter. It can be a combination of the both, as it is with Christianity. Christians continue to pretend that they are the long-suffering martyrs, even though Christianity is the most popular lifestyle brand in world history. But they continue to play the martyrs and the long-suffering, courageous, bold people who stand up for something unpopular, even though it's ridiculously popular. But while Christianity might, in some cases, impose conscience on people, increasingly it's obvious that it doesn't do that on the whole. On the whole, it frees people from conscience. After all, they're covered. They have their master excuse. They are Christian. I don't mean to pick on them. You can do it with anything. You can claim that you are an atheist and therefore you are right, righteous, and mighty, and therefore don't have to do any kind of self-monitoring. You are covered by your master excuse. The point I'm trying to make, though, and I make it out of compassion, not cynicism, out of deep concern for humankind, out of what I call neg-optimism, that is the optimism of an oncologist or a criminologist trying to make the world a better place by paying attention to why it's not. Out of that spirit, I say, crime does pay if you get away with it. Having no conscience pays mightily if you can get away with it. And it's very hard to keep those who are trying to get away with it from getting away with it. Here's an example. Came up with this idea this morning, a war of contrition. In a debate or fight between someone who has a conscience and someone who has somehow shed their conscience, the person with a conscience is going to be consumed by self-doubt. They will have contrition, especially when they're escalating, when they're forced to fight at a higher level than they hoped would be the case. You know, if they believe in loving kindness and tolerance and receptivity, for them to escalate in battle with someone with no conscience, they're going to feel grubby. The person without a conscience, the person who pretends to have a greater conscience but has no conscience, has none of that grubbiness to deal with. So a war of contrition is like a war of attrition. That is, you're wearing each other out. But who's going to wear out faster? The person with a conscience, obviously. They're fighting with one hand tied behind their back. They have to avoid overriding their own conscience, whereas the person who has no conscience, who has shed their conscience through some proud claim that they have more conscience than anyone else in the world, they don't have to suffer through any of that. It is elective psychopathy, and it has huge advantages. And until we can actually face that, I think we're going to muddle along and remain ineffectual, because it is so easy to shed one's conscience. Think about it. Animals lack conscience. Conscience is a human thing, just like being a psychopath is a human thing. There are no animal psychopaths. Morality is irrelevant in the world of other living beings. All of this stuff kicks in because of language. With language, we can be super-duper predators. That is, we can come up with rationalizations, justifications, moralizations, whatever we need to do to feel right, righteous, and mighty. And we don't have to mean any of it, because language can be lip service. And those of us who are trying to take words seriously, trying to listen, trying to be conscientious, trying to self-doubt appropriately for civilization's sake, are at a huge disadvantage against anybody, these super-duper predators who basically are doing a kind of amoral or unmoral, that is moral irrelevant, kind of animal braying, territorial pissing, and yet doing with the overlay of language. All it takes to be conscience-free is to deal with people who think that you mean what you're saying when you don't. It's hugely advantageous. So once again, while it's useful somewhat to say that people try to be good, I don't believe that's the case. People try to sound like they are trying to be good, but I don't think they're all trying to be good for the sake of cultivating people's conscientiousness that crime doesn't pay, and those people who lack conscience always end up with some kind of comeuppance, some kind of just desserts. None of that's true. Crime pays beautifully if you can get away with it. And plenty of conscience-free people thrive throughout their lives and die peacefully with the family at the bedside. If there were a God, and there is no God, but if there were one, heaven and hell would be the least they could do to right the injustices of a world in which it is hugely advantageous to shed your conscience. Elective psychopathy. It's a terrible problem, and until we face it, we're just not going to make any progress on it at all.